The scent of smoke lingers, but no fire burns. What secret lies behind the window? Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching this from tonight? Your words always bring this community to life. I can't wait to read them. Now, let's begin. There's a right way to bring trouble into Nero Wolfe's house, and it does not begin with Mr. Goodwin. I know this sounds ridiculous. I have a personal policy about that sentence. As soon as I hear it, I look for the most comfortable chair because I know I'll be in for a while. The woman at the door had the look of someone who had apologized her whole life for being quicker than other people. Quick-eyed, quick-voiced, quick to notice when you glanced at the scuffed corner of her briefcase. She was 30-something, in a gray coat that didn't try to be stylish, and a red scarf that did the job anyway. Her hands smelled faintly of varnish. She gave her name as Lila Fenwick and said she was an archivist. Records, not history, she added, as if that would help. I work for Calhoun and Brooke. Antiques, restorations, catalog sales. We handle private collections. Collections of what? I asked. Everything that can be ruined, she said. Paintings, letters, maps, carved whatevers, old wood. My boss says I rescue time from people who don't deserve it. She didn't wait for me to decide if that was a charm offensive or an apology. She was already peeking past me into the hall, which I discourage. I got between her and the view and told her the situation. It was 11 in the morning. Wolfe was in the plant rooms pretending orchids were an acceptable substitute for civilization, and if she insisted on ridiculous, she could have coffee while she waited for the human mountain to descend. Coffee would be heaven, she said. I can pay your fee. That's a relief, I said, and took her coat and scarf and led her into the office. You know the office. The desk where I earn my halo, Wolfe's chair that would collapse under any other man and never under him, the globe that has seen more finger-pointed indignation than most diplomats, the books, the beer cooler that has had its feelings hurt by the word cooler for 20 years. The windows were shut tight because even in late March, New York gives you a wind that thinks it's your landlord. Fritz brought in coffee and took a polite look at Lila that told me he approved of the scarf. Lila sat and put the briefcase on her lap like a dog that might bolt. She was shaking in the way people shake when they've talked themselves into doing something they're not built for. I gave her the cushions and the smile and asked her why our lungs were about to earn their pay. It's a window, she said, at the firm. A big ugly thing in the back room, old glass, wavy, the kind that makes the street look like it's been drinking. It's sealed. Has to be, because some of the pieces we store can't handle drafts. The room is climate controlled. No one smokes in the building. We have the kind of clients who smell a match from 2 floors up. And the ridiculous part? I asked. It smells like smoke, she said. Not always. Not every hour, but some mornings when I open up, the room smells like someone has blown smoke right through the glass. Not tobacco exactly. Something darker, like pine that's been burned wet. It's faint. It's wrong. And I can't find where it's coming from. You called an HVAC guy, I asked. 2, she said. One laughed and said sometimes old buildings leak in metaphors. The other wanted to replace our entire filtration system and then invited me to dinner. I believed her about the dinner. I asked how long this had been going on. 2 weeks, she said. The first day I noticed it, there was also a small change on a shelf. A leather folio turned the wrong way. I assumed the janitor had dusted with ambition. The second day, nothing. The third, the smell again, and a little white curl of ash on the window sill. Just one. And no one had been in the room. It's locked, only 3 keys. Mine, Mr. Calhoun's, and Anna's. She's our conservator. She was watching my face for the expression people look for when they want to be told they are not crazy. I keep that one on a leash. And you think what? I asked. That the window is learning bad habits? I think, she said carefully, that someone is visiting our back room through a way I can't explain, and they're careless. And I think they're leaving me a message I don't understand. Or they're laughing. Or both. Have you told your boss? I asked. She nodded. Mr. Calhoun says I'm stressed. He says the city stinks and it sneaks into everything. Anna says if I stop drinking espresso, I'll stop smelling smoke. 2 days ago I told them if the room smells again, I'm calling a detective. Yesterday morning it did. So here I am. There's a scale I use that runs from nuisance to felony, and a separate gauge for how likely Wolfe is to care. Sabotage to a climate-controlled room in a place that houses rich people's breakable memories is not murder, but it isn't a prank either. As for Wolfe, he reserves his curiosity for things that insult him. He thinks of the brownstone as a monastery where the order is dedicated to appetite and logic. He's more likely to accept a case if something about it violates that rule of control. A sealed room that smells of smoke belongs on the same shelf as locked doors and footprints that don't lead anywhere. It's an insult to locks and footprints. I told Lila she had earned her coffee and I would fetch the abbot. I went upstairs. The plant room smelled like money and patience. Wolfe was in his yellow smock supervising a pot that looked like a shy octopus. He didn't bother. Turning, I gave him the summary. Smoke that arrived where it wasn't invited, a window behaving like a suspect, and an archivist whose nose I was willing to trust. A triviality, he said. Possibly a defect in a seal. Possibly an invention. Possibly a job, I said. He grunted, which is the most generous concession I usually get before noon. Price? We didn't discuss it, I said. But I think there's more, and she didn't say it yet because she wanted to see if we would laugh. Also, if you're waiting for the orchids to confess, I can save you time. He said something soft to the octopus and came down 15 minutes later, smelling of potting mix and unwillingness. When he entered the office, Lila stood. She had composed herself into competence again, the kind that comes from knowing how to carry a box that weighs as much as your last chance. Wolfe nodded to her, sat, arranged himself like a verdict, and told me to sit too. He doesn't like people hovering. It makes him feel like a planet. You are Miss Fenwick, he said. You work at Calhoun and Brooke. You're here about a smell. Her chin ticked up half an inch. Yes, sir. Mr. Goodwin has relayed the facts as he understands them. They are insufficient to warrant my interest. There is likely a mechanical explanation. It does not require a detective. It requires a man with adhesive and a ladder. Maybe, she said quietly. But today the smell was different. It was stronger, and it came with something else. What? Wolfe asked. She opened the briefcase and slid out a glassine envelope. Inside was a thin strip of paper browned by age. Hand-cut. On it, written in a cramped 19th century hand, was a single phrase, broken from a larger thought. And the window smelled of smoke. I'll say this for Wolfe. He's theatrical only when the script is truly promising. His eyes came to me, not her. Mine went back to the envelope, then to her hands. She was steady now. She had been holding out because she wanted to see if we deserved the rest of the story. Where did you find that? I asked. In the folio that was turned wrong, she said. It's part of a diary we're restoring for a private seller. 1871. A merchant's wife. She writes like a ledger that learned to gossip. The page this came from is gone. Cut cleanly. Today the fragment was lying on the inside sill, and the room smelled as if someone had put a match to a wet pine branch and then blown through the glass. She met Wolfe's gaze for the first time. I've seen lions blink in zoos. She didn't blink. I don't know what it means, she said, but I know whoever took the page wants me to know they did. And that they read it. Who owns the diary? I asked. A man named Silas Brooke, she said, brother of one of our partners. He's selling off the last of his family's papers. He doesn't care what they say, only what they bring. Wolfe lifted the envelope by one corner and studied the script. He does not like touching anything that has already been touched by history, but paper is a weakness. It doesn't resist him. He sniffed, not the paper, the air round it. Then he set it down. "You have not informed the police," he said. "No," Lila said. "If I did, Mr. Calhoun would say I'd called them for nothing, and the police would say the same. And whoever is enjoying this would enjoy that most." "Describe the keys," Wolfe said. "Yours, Mr. Calhoun's, Anna's, they're old brass. We had them cut last year when we installed the new lock. The locksmith put his initials on the heads. If anyone copied them, they took their time. The lock is a Morton double lever." "2 turns. Describe the room," Wolfe said. "Walls, shelves, cases, vents." She did, clean and quick. She had measured the place in her mind so often she could have drawn it with her eyes closed. 3 rows of rolling stacks, a tall cabinet with glass doors, a preservation table under the window, a vent above the door that breathed softly like a sleeper, a humidity gauge that would tattle at the slightest provocation. As she spoke, Wolfe's eyelids came halfway down, which is his version of listening hard. Fritz's clock ticked. Outside, a truck tested the patience of an entire block. I tried to remember if I'd ever smelled smoke where there shouldn't be any, and had it turn out to be a happy coincidence. I hadn't. "What is your relationship to your employer?" Wolfe asked, still not looking at her. "Professional," she said. "Mr. Calhoun is careful with money and careless with people. He thinks slender women are better for credentials than cabinets, and Miss Anna." "Anna is good at her work," Lila said. "She thinks I am good at mine when I stay in my lane." "You are out of your lane," Wolfe said. "Yes," Lila said, "because whatever this is, it's not going to stop at a smell. And if it touches the collections, the damage won't be measured in insurance. It will be measured in what's gone." Wolfe's mouth twitched, a bare acknowledgement that she had picked the one argument that sits comfortably in his house. He hates waste, especially the cultivated kind, whether of orchids or words, or the pieces of paper that carry somebody's life 40 miles past their death. "What do you want of me, Miss Fenwick?" he asked. "An answer," she said. "Why the smell? How the strip of paper moved from a bound folio to my windowsill without the lock telling me. Who is doing it, and why they want me to know they're doing it. And if you can manage it, I want them to stop." "You are prepared to be insulted by my fee," Wolfe said. "I'm prepared," she said. He let the room collect the silence and hold it up for inspection. Then he looked at me. "Archie, call Mr. Saul Panzer. Ask about Morton double-lever locks and the current rate at which keys are dishonestly reproduced in Manhattan. Then draft a letter to Mr. Calhoun requesting permission to examine his premises. Miss Fenwick, you will provide the address and the convenient hours. I do not travel without cause." "You're taking it?" she asked, not relief, but verification. "I'm acknowledging a proposition," Wolfe said. "If your fragment is genuine, someone has contrived a trifling performance with the intention of leading you by the nose. I dislike being made to follow a leash by the anonymous. I prefer to hold it." He leaned back, closed his eyes, and drummed 2 fingers on the arm of the chair, another piece of theatre, but only for those of us who know the next line. "Until I have reason to do otherwise," he said, "I will assume the window is honest and the people are not. Mr. Goodwin will go with you this afternoon. He will look, listen, and smell, since that sense has been nominated to lead. Do not tidy before he arrives. Disorder is often the only thing that tells the truth." Lila exhaled, not like someone saved, but like someone given a job. "I'll call Mr. Calhoun," she said. "He'll bluster." He always blusters before lunch. "Then call him before lunch," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin, arrange your day. Fritz, beer." When she left, I walked her to the door. On the threshold she paused, and the fast look was back. "Why did he take it?" she asked. "You said it yourself. It's probably nothing mechanical we can't fix with a ladder and glue." "Because," I said, "Wolfe enjoys being told the world works one way and then finding where it cheats. And because you brought him a sentence that belongs in our line of work." She nodded. "I thought so." I watched her cross 30th Street with her briefcase and her scarf arguing about the wind. When I came back, Wolfe had his eyes closed and the empty glass on the table. He opened one eye to check whether his decision had been properly admired. "You didn't tell her why you really bit," I said. He closed the eye again. "I did not," he said. "I knew better than to press. If there is one thing the brownstone teaches a man, it's patience, right after it teaches you to keep windows shut. But as I picked up the envelope with the strip of paper, something in the old ink caught a draft that wasn't there and gave me a whisper of pine burned wet. If it was a trick, it was a good one. If it wasn't, we had a window that had learned an old habit, to bring other people's smoke into a clean room and leave you guessing whom it belonged to. I phoned Saul Panzer first, because in Manhattan you don't pull on a thread without checking what kind of sweater it's attached to. Saul grunted when I said Morton double lever, which is professional for, an honest lock with dishonest friends. He promised to ring back in an hour with the gossip. Anna's eyes typed a neat letter on Wolfe's best parchment, the kind that makes petty men feel important, and got Lila on the line in time to catch Mr. Calhoun before lunch did. There was bluster, as advertised. He wanted to know who we thought we were. He knew who we were, and whether we would indemnify the atmosphere against slander. I said no, but we would be in his back room at 2:30. He said he would be there to supervise our contamination of his schedule. Wolfe, with the day's exercise completed at 37 steps to and from the plant rooms, settled into his chair as if he'd signed a pact with upholstery. He knew what he wanted: senses, sequence, and silence. I got my notebook, my nose, and my patience, and at 2:20 I was pushing open the door of Calhoun and Brooke. The front room was a study in genteel salvage. Everything had been rescued from something worse. Warped tables straightened by money, paintings with varnish peeled back to show they had faces under their history, a bronze whose patina had been taught good manners. A bell tinkled with the sort of refinement that expects you to apologize for making it work. A man with a smile he rented by the day and kept receipts came from behind a desk and tried to decide whether I would steal a paperweight. I introduced myself and asked for Mr. Calhoun. He appeared, tall and narrow, wearing a suit that thought too highly of itself and hair that had made peace with retreat. His hand was cool and dry. He looked at my shoes, which is a habit of men who never relax unless someone else is uncomfortable. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, as if the name were a concession, "you will be careful." "Only when it's necessary," I said. "Where's the room that refuses to behave?" He led me back past a corridor of doorways that smelled like insurance and old walnut. He didn't bother with introductions to the staff as we passed. He preferred me to meet the building as a whole and decide he was the only part worth attention. At the end of the corridor, he produced a key and gestured to another one in my direction, in case I wanted to see that his was real. He turned it twice with a certain ceremony and opened onto the preservation room. It was exactly as Lila had drawn with her words. 3 rows of rolling stacks, not the kind that break your toe when you forget where they are, but the kind that glide along rails like obedient cattle. A tall cabinet with glass doors stood to the left, the glass so clean it was mostly an opinion. The preservation table sat under a window of wavy old glass that made the brick wall of the building opposite look like a reprimand delivered under water. The vent above the door hummed a confident tenor. A humidity gauge on the wall regarded me as if I might be emissions. Anna was there, sleeves rolled, hands clean, eyes meant for microscopes. She nodded when Calhoun said my name, and went on not liking me for bringing a detective into a room where history had to be handled gently. Lila came in a minute later with her briefcase, less shaky now that she was on home ground. "Do you smell it?" she asked, too fast. "No," I said, "but I haven't insulted the window yet." Calhoun folded his arms. "We have an appointment, so please be efficient." I agreed to this because Ms. Fenwick seemed on the verge of melodrama, and I will not have melodrama near Parchment. "I'll do my best to keep the swooning to a minimum," I told him, and went to the window. I've smelled a lot of smoke in my time, all of it where it wanted to be. This window wanted to be untouched. The wood frame had a recent varnish, brushed on by someone who did not apologize for their wrists. The putty was old and properly cracked, but sealed with a bead of clear resin at the junction of glass and wood. Along the inside sill, I saw what Lila had reported, a single grey curl of ash, as tidy as a punctuation mark. I didn't touch it yet. I got close enough to fog the glass and didn't, and breathed in. Nothing. The room had the neutral dignity of spaces that have arranged their temperature and intend to be obeyed. If there had been smoke that morning, it had said its piece and left. "Who cleaned in here last?" I asked. "I did," Anna said. "Yesterday afternoon." "And this?" I nodded at the ash. "I left it," Lila said. "I didn't want to be accused of inventing the obvious." "Do you usually keep the folio with the diary in the cabinet?" I asked. "In the cabinet and in a custom folder," Anna said. "It was on the second shelf from the top, left stack." She slid the cabinet door with offended grace and reached for the folio. The leather had seen better readers. She opened it on the table like she was introducing an aunt to company. The diary pages were guarded by interleaving tissue, each sheet a whisper. The cut edge where the fragment had been removed was surgical. "Who has handled this since you received it?" I asked. "Me," Anna said. "Miss Fenwick. Mr. Calhoun on the first day, when he wanted to see if it looked valuable. 2 clients viewed it last week by appointment. Both wore gloves. I watched them," Calhoun sniffed. "The clients are not suspects." "That's generous," I said, "but not binding." I bent over the cut edge. It wasn't torn. Someone had used a thin blade and patience. I stepped to the door and listened. The vent's hum was steady. I took out a small pocket mirror. It's amazing how often a man is saved by vanity, and held it under the vent. No tremble betrayed a gust trying to pass for a ghost. I crouched, put my face level with the sill, and followed the line of resin along the putty. In the corner where the lower sash met the stile, there was a nick in the resin bead, not big enough for a moth to get ideas. I ran a fingernail along it and felt the drag of something tacky. Not resin. The smell rose then, the faintest ribbon of wet pine, there and gone. If I had not been pre-approved by the notion, I might have missed it. I turned to them. "Do you ever open this window?" "Never," Anna said, the word capitalized. "Good," I said. "Because if you did, I'd have to throw this lock away and start over." I showed them the nick. "Someone has compromised the seal along the corner, reapplied something to look like the original bead, and left a gap barely wider than a hair. If you blow smoke into a straw, the glass won't argue. The smell would enter and diffuse evenly. A gift from the opposite building or the alley." Calhoun made a huffy noise a huffy man makes when he senses competence emerging from a hat he didn't provide. "That is absurd." "Who on earth would—" "Someone who wants you to believe in miracles," I said. "Someone who wants Ms. Fenwick to be the proving ground, and who had time alone in here with patience and a tool. Anna, do you ever prop this door? Does the latch ever not catch?" She set her mouth. "If I leave it open, the humidity swings." "I don't good," I said, and finally nudged the ash into a small envelope. "This isn't from a cigarette. It's soft, like incompletely burned softwood. I'll have a friend tell me what kind of tree wants to put on a show." Saul phoned as if he'd been cued. "Your lock," he said, "is respectable." Keys can be duplicated if someone has them for 5 minutes and a mind that turns corners. Better chance, though. Impressioning. Wax, soft metal, a clamp, and time. Or a bump key if the tumblers play nice. Location, I told him, and he said he would stroll by to admire the real estate and the exits, then hung up because Saul doesn't use words gratuitously. "Mr. Calhoun," I said, "I'd like to see your log of who accesses this room and when. If there isn't one, start one." "We have a sign-in sheet," Lila said quietly. "I started it 3 months ago. It's not official, but it's honest." "That will do for a beginning," I said. "Also, I'd like a list of your staff with keys and anyone who could get a key without a confession." Calhoun bristled. "I will not have my people treated like—" I pointed at the cut page. "Your people are already being treated like that. By someone who either works for you, wishes to, or knows how to behave in a room like this without leaving fingerprints. If I were malicious and wanted to hurt your inventory without touching anything obvious, I would start by making the person who cares most doubt their senses. Ms. Fenwick, consider yourself flattered." She didn't smile. "I'd prefer an insult." "You may get both." I went back to the window and looked out. Across the narrow space, the opposite brick had an iron fire escape and a line of windows that knew too much. One, level with ours, had a small discoloration at the sill, like something had been held there too often. The glass was cleaner in a circle the size of a teacup. A man could stand inside with a cigar or a pine splint and blow through a straw across 10 feet of city air all day long if he wanted an audience to arrive at a particular conclusion. "Who's the neighbor?" I asked. "Vacant floor," Calhoun said. "The building is under renovation." I nodded. Vacant rooms are excellent listeners. I closed my notebook and turned to Lila. "Tell Mr. Wolfe I'll be back by 4. And tell him this. The window isn't lying. Someone is. The question is whether the liar wants a page, a panic, or both." I left Calhoun and Brooke with the ash envelope in my pocket and the opposite building in my notebook. Saul would nose around outside, which meant I could focus on Wolfe. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that when something doesn't add up, Wolfe will sit until the numbers crawl to his chair and explain themselves. My job is to make sure there are numbers to add. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair with a bottle of beer half emptied and the patience of a man waiting to be confirmed in his suspicions. I laid out the ash, the cut page, and the description of the gap in the window seal. I told him about the opposite building, the too clean circle on the glass across the alley, and the vent that hummed too steadily to be an accomplice. He listened with the quiet that is never quite quiet. It's Wolfe's way of holding a courtroom where the witness is also the accused. When I finished, he tapped the envelope with one thick finger. "Pine," he said. "You can tell that just by looking?" I asked. "No. I can tell it because you said wet pine and because I smelled it when Miss Fenwick was here. Pine smolders, tobacco burns. This is deliberate mischief," I said. "Someone across the alley is blowing smoke through a hairline breach in the resin. That's no accident, and someone with a knife cut that page clean." Wolfe closed his eyes, which meant he was interested. "Miss Fenwick's instincts are accurate. The intrusion is not physical. It is psychological. It is designed for her. Someone has chosen a stage, written a script, and selected an audience. They want her to see, to doubt, to fear." "That's good theater," I said. "Bad for business." "Indeed," Wolfe said. He opened his eyes. "You observe the principles?" "Calhoun, yes. Tall, brittle, a man who thinks expense is virtue. Anna, competent, neat, not fond of me or the idea of intrusion. Both had access. Both had opportunity. But neither struck me as the type to saw off a page of a diary and leave ash like a calling card." "Impressions are not evidence," Wolfe said, "but impressions are rarely worthless. Did either appear unsettled by your presence?" Calhoun looked like he had indigestion. Anna looked like I had tramped mud onto her microscope. Then they were unsettled. Wolfe said, "Their reasons remain to be distinguished." The phone rang. I picked it up. Saul's voice was as dry as ever. "The opposite building is vacant, but not lifeless. Second floor is leased by a private renovator. Name given is Paul Darnell. He uses it for storage, supposedly." I watched 20 minutes, no workers, no tools. Just Darnell, alone, entering at 9, leaving at noon. Window opposite yours has faint soot on the sill. He smokes a pipe. Pine shavings in the tray. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "A neighbor," I said. "Name of Darnell. Storage tenant, pipe smoker. Pine shavings. Soot at the window, convenient," Wolfe said. "Too convenient. A visible culprit is often camouflage. Still, the fact is useful. We must know whether Mr. Darnell has any connection to Calhoun and Brooke, or to Miss Fenwick, or to the collection." "I'll ask," I said. "Not yet," Wolfe said. "You will return tomorrow with Miss Fenwick's cooperation. You will observe the room again with particular attention to the diary. If another page is cut, the trespass is ongoing. If not, the cut was meant to frighten, not to steal. Meanwhile, I will require background on Mr. Silas Brooke, the owner of the diary, who he is, what he wants, and who might wish to prevent the sale of his papers. You don't want me to knock on Darnell's door?" "Not yet," Wolfe said firmly. "A man who wishes to be seen may also wish to see who notices. If you approach, you confirm the effectiveness of his theater. Patience, Archie. First, establish the circle, which was Wolfe's way of saying suspects come before solutions." The next morning, I escorted Lila back to the preservation room. She was steadier now, like someone who had chosen to believe her nerves weren't lying. The ash from yesterday had been cleared. The folio was still in the cabinet. Anna was there, watching me as if I had brought chalk dust into her lungs. Calhoun was absent, allegedly at a client lunch. I checked the window again. The nick in the resin was the same. I leaned out the glass and counted bricks. The opposite window was closed but too clean in its circle, as before. When I came back inside, Lila had opened the folio to a different section. Her face was pale. "Another page," she said. The cut was fresh, the edge too sharp to have aged overnight. Anna swore she had checked the cabinet that morning and found it intact. Lila held out a slip, smaller than the first. This one read, "And she said the window had no reason to speak, yet it whispered." That was when I knew Wolfe had been right. Someone wasn't after money, or even the diary itself. They were staging a conversation through the pages of a dead woman's journal, meant for Lila Fenwick to read, and meant for Nero Wolfe to answer. I told her to put the slip in her briefcase and that we were going back to the brownstone. If Wolfe disliked being disturbed by ghosts through a window, he'd hate being written to by one through stolen pages, and hate, in Wolfe's world, is often the first step toward justice. When I laid the second slip on Wolfe's desk, he looked at it as though it had personally insulted his digestion. He didn't reach for it, not even with the corner of fingernail trick he uses when paper might be contaminated with stupidity. He sat back, hands folded on the dome of his stomach, and let his eyelids lower a fraction. That's how he listens to writing, the way most men listen to a witness with something to hide. "So," I said, "yesterday we had smoke where smoke shouldn't be. Today we have a diary that writes letters after it's had half its throat cut. If it starts sending telegrams, do I put that in expenses?" "Pfui," Wolfe said. He didn't open his eyes. "This is not whimsy, Archie. It is intrusion made articulate. The first fragment was to gain attention. This one is to sustain it. They are communicating with us." "With Miss Fenwick," Wolfe said. "We are intermediaries." But the intended recipient is Claire. Lila was across from me, in the red scarf again, clutching her briefcase like it contained the last steady thing in her life. She hadn't spoken since she handed over the fragment. Her eyes darted between us, waiting for Wolfe to bestow logic like a priest with reluctant sacraments. "Why me?" she asked, finally. "If someone wants to frighten the firm, why not send the notes to Mr. Calhoun?" "Because Mr. Calhoun is not susceptible," Wolfe said. "He is vain and selfish. He would sneer, accuse, or ignore. You, Miss Fenwick, are competent, principled, and impressionable. You care. That makes you the more efficient recipient and the more efficient target." Her chin trembled, but she held it still. "They're writing to me with her words," she said. "The woman from the diary. They're making her ghost talk." "No," Wolfe said sharply. "They are mutilating her record to impersonate her. There is nothing supernatural in this. Do not grant them that satisfaction. This is a trick, and every trickster lives on the belief of his audience." That put some color back in her face. Mine too, because if Wolfe starts swatting ghosts, we'll be in the seance business by Tuesday. "What about the neighbor?" I asked. "Pipe smoker, pine ash. Soot circle on the sill. Saul says his name is Darnell. He spends mornings in the opposite building alone. Perhaps," Wolfe murmured. "Or perhaps Darnell is the goat tethered in view of the tiger. Too obvious. A man who leaves soot on his sill is either a fool or an exhibitionist. Both are useful, but neither is sufficient. So we have Calhoun, brittle as a breadstick, Anna, careful enough to miss nothing unless she wants to, a neighbor who smokes pine like it's a hobby, and a collection owned by Silas Brooke, who's unloading his family's past. Someone in that circle wants to make Lila lose her footing, correct?" Wolfe said. "And they are escalating." "Escalating to what?" Lila asked. "That," Wolfe said, "we must prevent by determining the object of their play. If it is to unsettle you, they will persist until you falter. If it is to halt the sale of the papers, they will intensify. If it is to demonstrate cleverness to me—" He let the sentence hang, which was more ominous than finishing it. I fetched him another beer, because the air had gotten heavy, and I prefer him lubricated when he's grim. He took it, sipped, and then opened his eyes fully. "Archie, you will proceed as follows. First, obtain a full catalogue of the Brooke papers from Miss Fenwick. Second, inquire discreetly whether any potential buyer has shown particular interest in the diary. Third, determine the relationship of Mr. Darnell to either Brooke or Calhoun. Fourth, arrange for Mr. Saul Panzer to survey the opposite building from within, if possible. I will not accept coincidence as an explanation." "And if it's just mischief?" I asked. "Then it is mischief perpetrated by someone with access, patience, and knowledge of human nerves," Wolfe said. "That is not trivial. Mischief of that quality is always preliminary." Lila straightened in her chair. "I can get you the catalogue tonight," she said. "Anna won't like it, but I can." "Do so," Wolfe said, "and be circumspect. The less Mr. Calhoun knows, the less opportunity he has to impede." She nodded, gathered her things, and left with the briefcase tight to her ribs. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled as if he'd endured a sermon. "Archie, observe. Someone is staging a dialogue across time. They have chosen an archivist as their confederate, unwilling though she is. They have chosen me as their eventual audience. It is intolerable." "Good," I said. "When you're intolerant, I get to earn overtime." The next morning began with Saul calling to say Darnell's lease was thin paper, paid in cash by a courier who never gave a name. No workers had been seen entering with lumber or paint. Just Darnell smoking by the window, watching across the alley as if rehearsing. Saul added that the floor above was truly vacant, the one below rented to a shipping company that never set foot there. I took that to Wolfe, who grunted, and then to Lila, who was waiting with the catalogue. She handed it to me in the street like a spy passing microfilm. The diary was listed among dozens of letters, invoices and ledgers. Nothing distinguished it, except that it contained, in her words, a woman's private account of her family during the year of fire. "Fire?" I asked. She nodded. The diary begins in 1871, Chicago. She describes the days before and after the Great Fire. Her husband was a merchant. She wrote everything down. People came to her for help because her house was one of the few left standing. She called it the house that the fire circled but did not consume. She mentions the windows often, how they blackened, how they smelled of smoke but didn't crack. That put a tingle in my scalp. So our prankster knows the text. They're cutting out her lines about windows and smoke and feeding them back to you. "Yes," she said, as if they're making her talk to me. "And, by extension, to Wolfe," I said. She shivered, but not from cold. "Archie, this is about the diary. It isn't about me at all. It's about her. Someone wants her voice heard again, in pieces, out of order." "Or silenced," I said. When I returned with the catalogue, Wolfe read it cover to cover without shifting in his chair. When he was done, he said, "So, the fragments are not random. They are selections. Whoever cuts them knows the diary intimately. That narrows our circle to Anna," I said, "or Calhoun, or Brooke himself. Or our visible neighbor, if he has read them," Wolfe said. "But that presumes access. We must establish it. Tonight, Archie, you will return with Miss Fenwick to the preservation room. Do not inform the others. Wait until after hours. I want to know what the room says when no one but you is listening." "Stakeout," I said. "Observation," Wolfe corrected. "Stakeouts are vulgar. You will observe, record, and smell. If another page is cut in your presence, we will have proof that the intruder is not merely theatrical. We will have proof of trespass in act, not aftermath. And if nothing happens—" Wolfe closed his eyes again. "Then nothing will be something. In this business, Archie, silence can be as telling as speech, especially when the window smells of smoke." At 9 that evening, I was standing with Lila in front of Calhoun and Brooke, waiting for her key to remember its job. She wore a darker coat this time, maybe to match the mood. The street was quiet enough that the hum of the city felt like it had been turned down to a whisper. She slid the key twice in the lock and pushed the door with the kind of care people usually reserve for sick relatives. We stepped inside. The preservation room greeted us with its measured air, the humidity dial steady, the stacks immobile. The only sound was the faint whir of the vent, which, if it ever decided to mutiny, could probably drive a sane archivist crazy. We left the lights dim. I wanted to see the place the way an intruder would, not the way a restorer did. Lila went to the cabinet and opened it, showing me the diary like she'd show a priest her confession. The tissue leaves shivered slightly in the draught, though the window was sealed. I bent to check the resin corner. The nick was still there, faint but waiting. I leaned close and caught it. A trace, just a trace, of that same wet pine. "Someone was here today," I murmured. She swallowed. "I was in here until 6. I swear no one came after me." "Maybe not by the door," I said. "That's what we're here to find out." I'd brought along a small flashlight, a notepad, and a pocket mirror, none of which impress Wolfe, but all of which have saved me from writing reports full of guesswork. I settled on the preservation table and let the silence stretch. Lila perched on the edge of a stack like a nervous student. I told her to relax. That was an order, not advice. We waited an hour. Nothing but the sigh of the vent, the creak of old wood. At 10:15 I heard it. A faint scrape, not from the hall, but from outside the window. Lila stiffened. I held up a hand. We stayed still. The scrape came again, soft but deliberate, like someone adjusting something metal against brick. I slid off the table, crossed to the window, and pressed my ear against the cold glass. Through the warped pane, the opposite building was a shadow quilt, but one square of it gleamed faintly, the clean circle of glass I'd noticed before. In that circle, a dim orange pulse flared and died. Someone had lit something. Then it came, the smell, stronger this time, seeping through the corner gap like an invitation. Wet pine, acrid and heavy. Lila clutched the table with white knuckles. I watched the faint smoke gather in the circle of the opposite window, then vanish. A moment later, behind us, something shifted in the cabinet. I spun, flashlight beam cutting across shelves. The diary sat where it had before, closed, but not quite right. The folder was a hair off its mark. I reached it in 3 steps, yanked it out, and opened to the middle. Another page was gone, and on the interleaving sheet, as though left for delivery, was the new fragment. The flame crept close, yet the window neither broke nor spoke, only remembered. I slipped it into my notebook before Lila could touch it. She was shaking, not with fear now, but with anger. "They're doing it while we're standing here," she whispered. "Not through the door," I said, "and not through the lock." Which means someone had their time earlier. They cut this page before we arrived, tucked the fragment in, and waited for us to smell the performance. The smoke is just punctuation. But how could they? "Because one of your inner circle has access whenever they like," I said. "They stage it ahead. And our neighbor across the alley plays stagehand, pumping smoke to cue the drama." Her eyes flashed. "Anna," she said. "Or Calhoun," I reminded her. "Or Brooke, if he wants his family papers to stay unsold." Don't narrow the field too fast, I closed the folio, locked it back in the cabinet, and told her we were leaving. She didn't argue. Outside, the night air felt honest after the pine fakery. I walked her to a cab and promised Wolfe would have answers sooner than she feared. Whether I believed that was another matter. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was awake, which means he had chosen to be, not that he needed to be. I laid the fragment on his desk with a neatness that said I wasn't happy about it. He studied it, inhaled, and said only, "They are composing." "That's one word for it," I said. "They're cutting these fragments as if they're building a new diary out of the old." "One that talks to Lila or to me," Wolfe said. "This is no longer play. It is dialogue. They expect a response." "Then give them one," I said. "Not yet," Wolfe said. "A premature answer is as destructive as ignorance. We must first establish motive. Why should anyone wish to mutilate this diary? What secret is in its full text that is intolerable? Until we know that, we are responding to shadows." I poured myself a drink. Because if Wolfe was settling in for metaphors, I needed fortification. "What about Darnell?" I asked. "Saul says he's a ghost with a lease. Tonight we saw him light up. He's our delivery boy, or our distraction," Wolfe said. "Too visible, too simple. I will not be led by the nose." He turned his heavy gaze on me. "Tomorrow, Archie, you will locate Mr. Silas Brooke. Speak with him. Learn what the diary contains beyond these scraps. A merchant's wife in 1871 did not write only of smoke. She wrote of people. Who, what, which names? If one of those names tarnishes the present, that is our quarry. And if Brooke won't talk, you will make him," Wolfe said, "with charm or persistence, whichever he resents least. Meanwhile, I will require a transcript of every page of that diary. Miss Fenwick can arrange it. I want the text entire, so I may discover what has been cut away. A voice altered is still a voice, Archie. We must know what it once said, to measure what it is being made to say now." I nodded. It was a plan, and plans are better than fumes. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and let the room breathe for him. When I left him, the fragment still lay on his desk, the words etched like a taunt. The flame crept close. If this was dialogue, It was only just beginning, and I had the uncomfortable sense that Wolfe wasn't the only one meant to answer. The next morning I had my orders clear enough to be engraved. Find Silas Brooke, shake him until the diary's insides rattled out, and bring back whatever secrets might explain why his dead relative's voice was being carved up and repurposed. Wolfe had already settled into the day's orchid session, which meant he wouldn't be seeing callers until noon and wouldn't be forgiving interruptions until beer. I took that as a blessing. It meant the legwork was mine alone. Silas Brooke wasn't difficult to track. Men who liquidate their heritage through auction houses always leave a paper trail thick enough to interest tax collectors and pickpockets. A few calls to friends in the appraisal game got me an address on West 73rd, the kind of building where the bricks had known better days and the tenants pretended not to. I buzzed twice before a voice rasped, "Who?" through the intercom. I gave my name and affiliation. There was a long silence, then the door buzzed open. Brooke lived on the 3rd floor in an apartment that smelled of whiskey and mothballs, with curtains drawn tight against daylight. He was lean, older than his brother Calhoun, with a face that looked carved out of grudges. His clothes had once been expensive and still pretended to be. When I told him why I'd come, he motioned me to a chair that had lost its springs to better causes. "You're working for the girl," he said, as if Lila Fenwick's very existence was a conspiracy against him. "We're working for the truth," I said. "The girl's just the only one who had the sense to ask for it." He snorted. "Truth is expensive. Calhoun tells me you detectives charge like surgeons. And for what? To sniff at smoke?" "Among other things," I said. "Your diary has been cut, pages stolen, fragments left as little speeches. Do you know why?" His eyes flickered, and I knew before he spoke that he did. "It's a diary, Mr. Goodwin. My great-grandmother's. She wrote too much. Women did in those days. Idle hands, idle pens. What difference if a page is gone?" "Because someone wants it gone loudly," I said. "They're making a show of it, and Miss Fenwick is their audience. They choose her because she cares. What's in the diary, Brooke? Who's mentioned?" He poured himself whiskey from a bottle that hadn't earned breakfast. "Merchants. Customers. Half of Chicago, if you take her at her word. She wrote of the fire, the smoke, the windows that wouldn't crack. She wrote of her husband's dealings, who bought lumber, who owed debts. Names that don't matter now." "Names always matter to someone," I said. "Maybe not to you. But maybe to Calhoun, or to Anna, or to whoever thinks cutting out lines and sending them back is a fine way to spend an evening. Did she write about crime? About fraud? About debts unpaid?" His fingers tightened around the glass. "She wrote about survival. About which men stored their goods in her husband's warehouse before the fire, and how those goods somehow survived while others burned. She wrote of bargains struck in smoke and ruin. You see? She saw too much, and wrote too much, always scribbling, 'That woman,' I whistled low. And those men, any of their descendants still around?" He didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Finally, he shrugged. "Chicago families. New York families. Some of them rich enough now that they wouldn't like to be reminded their fortunes were built on ashes, or that their grandfathers sold protection in a burning city. Old stories, Mr. Goodwin. But old stories sometimes bite." I left him with his whiskey and his bitterness, neither of which were in short supply, and walked back into the daylight. On the way downtown, I phoned Wolfe and gave him the gist. The diary wasn't just idle gossip. It contained names, deals, and fire-born fortunes. Motive enough for someone to want it silenced or staged. Wolfe grunted in a way that told me he was already arranging the suspects like chess pieces. Back at the brownstone, I found him in the office, the fragments laid out before him like an unfinished sentence. He listened, eyes closed as I reported. When I finished, he opened them, sharp and gleaming. "So," he said, We have our fulcrum. The diary is not a curiosity. It is a ledger of dishonor. Someone fears its exposure or covets its manipulation. Miss Fenwick is their instrument because she is both vulnerable and incorruptible. The fragments are bait, meant to draw her into a drama she cannot ignore. Or meant to draw you, I said. Both, Wolfe conceded. But I will not dance to their piping until I know the tune entire. We require the full transcript at once. Fenwick can get it, I said. She's already risked Calhoun's temper once. She'll do it again. She must, Wolfe said. Meanwhile, Saul will continue his surveillance of Darnell. If he is merely stagehand, he will tire. If he is author, he will err. Archie, arrange with Miss Fenwick. Tonight, I want the diary here, not the original. Photocopy, transcript, facsimile, no matter. But the words, all of them? Until I have them, I am groping. And what about Calhoun? I asked. He won't like his stock in trade walking out the door in duplicate. Phooey. Calhoun's consent is immaterial. Miss Fenwick is already endangered. I will not have her left defenseless. Bring the transcript, Archie, and then we will call them here. Call who? The Circle, Wolfe said. All who touch the diary. Calhoun, Anna, Miss Fenwick, even this Darnell if he proves more than scenery. We will convene and I will speak, but not until I have every word your merchant's wife ever wrote. I left his office with the uneasy feeling that Wolfe was right about the Circle, but wrong about the timing. Whoever was cutting the diary wasn't slowing down, and if they thought the fragments were conversations, they might already be preparing their next line. That night, when I met Lila in a quiet cafe off Lexington, she handed me a folder so thick it could have been a phone book. Every page, she said, copied under Anna's nose. I told her it was for a client reference. She didn't argue, but she watched me the whole time. I slipped it under my arm. Good work. Now go home, lock your door, and don't answer to anyone who doesn't know how to spell orchids. She gave me a tired smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Archie, what if they don't stop? What if the diary isn't enough? Then Wolfe will make them stop, I said. That's what he does. He doesn't chase shadows. He waits for them to step into his light. As I left with the folder, I couldn't shake the thought that the light was already bait, and the shadows knew it. Whoever was playing this game wanted Wolfe to notice, and they had his attention now, whether he admitted it or not. I carried the folder home like it was nitroglycerin and set it on Wolfe's desk just after midnight. He was awake, which meant he had anticipated me. Fritz had left him with a plate of cheese and pears, both untouched, so you know his mind was working. I slid the folder across the polished wood. He looked at it as if it were a gift from an enemy, which in a way it was. You will read it? I asked. He tilted his head. You will read it aloud. That was the kind of answer I had expected but not hoped for. Still, I opened the folder, took a seat, and began. The merchant's wife was no novelist, but she was no bore either. She catalogued days like they were invoices, the weather, the price of bread, the arrival of news from the stockyards. Then came October, and the city turned to flame. She described the smoke that rolled like an ocean, the windows that blackened but did not break, the sound of timbers crashing in the night. She described neighbors who begged for storage in her husband's warehouse, and how some men's goods were miraculously preserved while others burned to ash. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed, but I could tell from the slight twitch of his fingers that he was assembling. The woman had written names, lots of them. Prominent Chicago families whose fortunes were rebuilt from salvaged goods. A ledger in narrative form. If her descendants ever wanted to pretend their wealth was spotless, this diary was an inconvenient witness. By the time I finished, the room felt smaller. Wolfe opened his eyes and spoke as if addressing the air. There is our motive. The fragments are not random poetry. They are selections from the portion of the text most dangerous to reputation. Whoever cuts them is also declaring knowledge of the whole. They mutilate to control the narrative. Control it how? I asked. To remind someone, or threaten them, that the past may be exposed. To suggest in fragments that secrets may return in altered form. Ms. Fenwick is chosen as vessel because she is credible. When she reports what she finds, others will believe her. It is elegant, if contemptible. So one of our circle is carrying water for an old family that doesn't want its history reprinted in ink, I said. That makes Calhoun's smug little face look guiltier than usual. Possibly, Wolfe said, but not conclusively. Calhoun's greed would incline him to suppress scandal. Anna's precision would make her capable of the careful cuts. Darnell's conspicuousness may conceal calculation, and Brooke, bitter as he is, may have reasons to stir trouble rather than bury it. We must hear them all. The office gathering will be indispensable. I rubbed my eyes. You want to summon the whole troop? Yes, Wolfe said, but not yet. First, we must confirm the hand that delivers the fragments. Tonight you observed smoke at the window and found a page already cut. That means the act of mutilation occurred earlier, unseen. I want the interval narrowed. Saul will watch the building by day. You will revisit the room with Miss Fenwick tomorrow morning, unannounced. If another page has been removed overnight, we will know the trespass continues on a schedule. You're staging a trap, I said. I am arranging inevitability, Wolfe corrected. Those who cut cannot resist continuity. They have begun a composition. They must finish it. And when they do, we will be waiting. I didn't argue. When Wolfe's tone slides into that marble weight, it's not worth it. I left him with the diary and went to bed with smoke still in my nose. The next morning I collected Lila from her apartment. She was pale but determined. We walked the familiar corridor at Calhoun and Brooke, her key turning like it had been rehearsed. Inside, the preservation room looked unchanged until we opened the cabinet. Another page was gone. The folio sat slightly crooked, as if it knew it had been violated. Tucked in the tissue, neat as ever, was the fourth fragment. The house that stood while others fell, yet its windows saw too much. Lila's breath hitched. She looked at me like I could stop the room from breathing. I slipped the scrap into an envelope. Wolfe was right, I said. They can't stop themselves. We locked the folio, checked the resin seam, still nicked, still faintly pungent, and left without telling Anna or Calhoun. Outside, Lila caught my arm. Archie, I don't know how much longer I can work there. Every time I open that cabinet, I feel like I'm being dared. That's what they want, I told her, to make you crack. So don't. We'll take it from here. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened as I read the new line aloud. His mouth tightened, which for him was outrage. Now they mock. The house that stood, the windows that saw. It is deliberate echo, chosen to rattle her. Fuai. The gall. Then it's time for your office gathering, I said. Soon, Wolfe said. First, Saul must confirm Darnell's role. If he is merely a smoke machine, then the blade lies elsewhere. If he is both blade and bellows, then he must be confronted. Archie, ensure Miss Fenwick is protected. She must not be left alone with the diary again. Bring her here if necessary. This case has ceased to be about smoke. It is about control, and I will not yield my house to another man's staging. He leaned back, eyes closing, fingers steepling. That was Wolfe when he'd drawn the perimeter of a problem and was ready to wait for the quarry to step inside. I knew what came next. Saul's report, the gathering of suspects, Wolfe's heavy voice cutting through pretense until someone broke. But as I sealed the fragment into the growing collection, I couldn't shake the thought that our adversary wasn't just threatening exposure. They were rehearsing a play. And in that play, we weren't the audience anymore. We were part of the cast. Saul's call came just after noon, while Wolfe was elbow-deep in trout with Fritz. I picked it up in the office and braced myself. Saul doesn't waste breath, and what he had now wasn't a report. It was a scalpel. "Darnell's not the author," he said. "He's the prop man. Goes in regular, smokes by the window, makes a show of it. But this morning I watched a handoff. A woman met him in the alley, gave him a sealed envelope. He pocketed it and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, smoke at the sill. Same as before, describe her," I said. "Tall, dark hair pinned back. Grey coat. She moved like someone who didn't want to be seen but knew she was too important not to be." "That's Anna," I muttered. "Could be," Saul said. "Could also be someone who wants to look like her." I wasn't close enough for the fine points, but it wasn't chance. "He's taking orders. Stay on him," I said. "If he breathes wrong, I want it." Saul hung up and I went to deliver the goods. Wolfe listened while Fritz filleted. When I finished, he put down his knife, wiped his hands, and grunted. As expected. Darnell is a cipher, a mechanism. The substance lies with the woman. If it was Ms. Anna, then precision meets subterfuge. She has both access and skill. "Why Anna, though?" I asked. "She lives for preservation. Cutting pages would be heresy." "Heresy, yes," Wolfe said. "But heresy undertaken to protect or to profit is not impossible. She may see mutilation as preferable to revelation, or she may be compelled. Either way, the choice of her as courier is logical. She is trusted. She can approach without suspicion. Calhoun is too visible. Brooke too bitter. Ms. Fenwick too honest. She looked at me like I'd tracked mud across her life," I said. "If she's our blade, she hides it well." "That is her skill," Wolfe said. "But speculation is insufficient. We will summon them now. Calhoun, Anna, Brooke, and the auxiliary, Darnell. All will come. Ms. Fenwick, too. The stage has been prepared for me. I will not allow another man to keep the script." I made the calls. Calhoun grumbled, Brooke snarled, Anna agreed with clipped precision, and Darnell said nothing at all. His silence was bought by Saul's escort. By 7 that evening, the office was crowded in a way Wolfe usually despises. He sat like a judge, hands folded, eyes half-lidded. The fragments lay on the desk in a neat line, silent witnesses. Calhoun paced like an insulted giraffe, muttering about lost time and wasted money. Brooke sat with his arms folded, daring anyone to pity him. Anna stood near the bookshelves, upright and polished, eyes calm, but too calm. Lila clutched her, scarf like a shield, watching the fragments with something close to fear. Darnell, under Saul's gaze, leaned in the corner, silent, smelling faintly of pine and defiance. Wolfe let the silence press on them until even Calhoun shut up. Then he spoke, slow and exact, his voice filling the room like a verdict already half delivered. "You have all been complicit, whether by act or by silence, in the mutilation of a historical document. The diary of Mrs. Abigail Brooke, written in the year of Chicago's conflagration, has been cut in calculated fragments. These fragments were not discarded. They were delivered, each chosen for effect, each accompanied by a performance of smoke, to Miss Lila Fenwick. The purpose was twofold, to unsettle her and to ensure the attention of Nero Wolfe. Both have been accomplished," Calhoun snorted. "This is absurd. Who would waste time with such theatrics?" "Someone with reason," Wolfe said coldly. "The diary names men whose fortunes rose from fire. Men whose descendants would not wish the method publicized. To suppress those names, or to manipulate their meaning, is motive enough. The mutilator selects passages that speak of windows, of smoke, of witness. They echo the very performance they stage. It is audacious, and it is damning." Brooke leaned forward. "And you think one of us is behind it?" "I do not think," Wolfe said. I know. Mr. Darnell has already admitted through his actions that he is delivery, not design. He smokes, he signals, he distracts. But the hand that cuts must have direct access. That narrows the circle to Calhoun, Anna, or you. Mr. Brooke. Anna's eyes narrowed just a fraction. You accuse without proof. Pfui, Wolfe said. Proof is the accumulation of inescapable fact. You had daily custody of the diary. You had skill with instruments delicate enough to slice without tearing. You had opportunity under the guise of preservation, and this morning you handed Mr. Darnell an envelope. Shall I detail the time and place, or will you? For the first time, her composure faltered. Calhoun swung toward her, his face tightening. Anna, she lifted her chin. I did not cut the diary. But yes, I gave him an envelope. What was in it? Wolfe demanded. She hesitated, then, a copy, a transcription of a passage. I was instructed, by whom? Her silence was answer enough. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. You will tell me. Who compelled you to commit sacrilege upon your own vocation? Was it Mr. Calhoun, eager to keep his firm untainted? Was it Mr. Brooke, eager to spite his family and sell scandal? Or was it another outside this room who fears their ancestor's name? Anna's lips pressed together, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled. Lila leaned forward, voice soft. Anna, please. Whoever it is, they're using you. They're using all of us. Wolfe allowed the moment to stretch, his silence more forceful than speech. Finally, Anna exhaled. It was Brooke. Silas Brooke. He told me to select the passages. He said he wanted the diary noticed, not forgotten. He wanted it read again, even if only in scraps. He said truth should bleed its way back into the world. Every head turned to Brooke. He didn't flinch. He smiled, thin and bitter. So what if I did? That diary is worth more mutilated than locked away. Who will pay for forgotten ledgers? But a scandal, a performance, that sells. It sells the rest of the collection. It sells me out of debt. You miserable, Calhoun began, but Wolfe cut him off with a hand. Enough. Mr. Brooke, you sought profit in desecration. You chose Miss Fenwick because her conscience would be your amplifier. You chose smoke because theater thrives on sensation. You chose fragments because scandal feeds on the partial. You are contemptible. Brooke laughed without humor, and you, Wolfe, are just another man profiting from my family's ghosts. At least I admit it. Wolfe's voice dropped to a growl. I do not profit. I prevent. This ends now. No further pages will be cut. Ms. Fenwick will retain custody of the diary until its sale is settled. And you, Mr. Brooke, will answer to the law if you so much as touch it again. The room was silent, heavy with smoke no one had lit. I looked at Wolfe, and I knew the case wasn't closed. Not yet. Because if Brooke was the author of the mutilation, then someone else was still whispering through that window, and Wolfe wasn't done listening. Brooke's admission hung in the office like a sour odor that no window could clear. Calhoun muttered curses about disgrace and clients. Anna kept her eyes lowered as if ashamed of her own complicity, and Lila sat rigid, the scarf twisted tight in her fists. Darnell, with Saul looming at his shoulder, looked like a hired stooge caught without a script. Wolfe allowed the silence to spread until each of them was forced to sit in it. Then he moved one finger against the arm of his chair, the smallest sound, and they all turned back to him as though he had fired a pistol. Mr. Brooke, Wolfe said, your mercenary vandalism explains the mutilation of the diary. But it does not explain the smoke Brooke snared. That was theater. Theatrics sell. I told Anna to arrange a signal, something to make the fragments impossible to ignore. She found Darnell for me. He was cheap, and he was willing. I leaned forward. That's neat, Brooke, but it's wrong. You didn't know about the resin nick in the window frame. You didn't know about the soot on Darnell's sill until someone told you, and you sure as hell didn't know the exact phrases that would rattle Fenwick until they were already gone. You've been directing traffic, but someone else drew the map. Brooks' smirk twitched, but Wolfe cut in before he could retort. Archie is correct. Mr. Brooke, your confession is not complete. You are too indolent to plan details of such precision. Someone guided you, perhaps encouraged your impulse to mutilate. Who? Brooks' silence stretched until Calhoun burst. Damn it, Silas, you've brought ruin on the firm. Who whispered in your ear? Who told you to butcher our collection? Brooks' eyes, roomy but sharp in hate, swung to his brother. You, Calhoun. All my life, you told me I was worthless, that I couldn't manage a penny. Maybe you were right. But when a buyer approached me quietly, offering money if I would make the diary interesting, I listened. Why shouldn't I? It was my property to sell. The room snapped taut. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A buyer, he said softly. Name. I never saw him, Brooks said. Only letters. No return address. He knew the text already, knew which passages to mark. Said mutilation would create demand. Said scandal sells better than honesty. I thought. His voice cracked on bitterness. I thought it was clever. At last I could make the family's ghosts pay me back, I asked. And the letters? Where are they? Brooke gave a half laugh. Burned. Isn't that poetic? Letters to feed the fire. Wolfe's face went darker than I like to see. Then the hand behind this is not in this room, he said. But he exists. He knows the diary. He profits from its desecration. He will not remain hidden. Anna spoke up, voice low but firm. It wasn't only Brooke. I saw a man once, waiting across the street when I left the building after dark. Tall, with a heavy coat. He turned away when I looked. Later, Brooke told me not to mention it. I thought it was coincidence. Coincidence is the coward's refuge, Wolfe growled. That was your buyer. He observes. He directs. He leaves others to execute. Lila finally found her voice. So it doesn't end here. Whoever he is, he'll keep pushing until he gets what he wants. Yes, Wolfe said, but he has already erred. He sought to make me his audience. He should have known better. Wolfe closed his eyes, signaling dismissal, but I wasn't letting them scatter yet. Hold it, I said. If there's an outside buyer, then the fragments weren't just for Fenwick. They were also for Wolfe. Somebody wanted him in this chair taking this bait, which means the next move isn't Brooks. It's theirs. Wolfe opened one eye. Astute, Archie. And that is why they will come here. I will arrange it. Calhoun barked a laugh. Invite phantoms, Wolfe. How? With bait of my own, Wolfe said. The mutilated diary is already a performance. We will announce that the performance will culminate here. Word will reach the author. He cannot resist attending his own play. Brooke muttered. He won't show his face. He must, Wolfe said, to complete the deception, to gloat, to control. Such men are never content with anonymity forever. I ushered them all out under Wolfe's orders, Saul shadowing Darnell to make sure he didn't vanish. When the door finally closed, the office felt clean again, though the fragment still sat accusingly on the desk. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, face unreadable. You believe him? I said. Partially, Wolfe replied. Brooke is too bitter to invent, but he is also too vain to admit the full scope. There is another hand. Tomorrow, Archie, you will place a notice. Calhoun and Brooke will display the diary privately to select buyers under the supervision of Nero Wolfe. That will draw him. And what do we do when he comes? Then, Archie, Wolfe said, I will oblige him to speak. That night I couldn't sleep. The fragments replayed in my head, each line more like a whisper than the last. The window smelled of smoke. It whispered. It remembered. It saw too much. Whoever was behind this hadn't finished their composition. They were saving the last lines for Wolfe himself. When dawn came grey over the city, I realized we weren't chasing a vandal anymore. We were waiting for a writer who thought he could make history his puppet. And Wolfe, in his chair, was waiting for him to step onto the stage he'd claimed. The notice went out in the morning, tucked discreetly into channels where collectors and dealers hunt for whispers. Wolfe dictated it with the gravity of an imperial decree, and I typed it with the knowledge that it was bait. Private viewing of the Brooke Diary, it read, to be supervised at the Brownstone by Nero Wolfe. By appointment only. It didn't matter whether the world believed it. The man behind the mutilations would. Wolfe spent the day in silence, save for the occasional bark at Fritz when the kitchen door squeaked. He didn't leave his chair, not even to wander to the plant rooms. He was listening, not with ears, but with patience, for the inevitable knock. I carried the phone, made a few calls to keep Saul in the loop, and waited with a nervous energy Wolfe pretends he doesn't understand. By late afternoon, we had our first nibble. Calhoun called, outraged. He had seen the notice, and he demanded it be withdrawn. Wolfe gave him a plea and hung up. That was expected. Half an hour later, a second call came, the voice cloaked in courtesy. The man gave his name as Ellery Prentice, a representative interested in Brooke family documents. He requested an evening appointment. Wolfe's lips twitched, which for him was thunderous laughter. He told me to confirm. At 7:30 sharp, the bell rang. I answered it, and there he was, tall, heavy coat, features composed into bland civility, the kind of face you forget until you notice how hard it works to be forgotten. His eyes flicked past me into the hall, measuring. I stepped aside and led him into the office. Wolfe was waiting, monumental and immovable, the fragments spread neatly on his desk. "Mr. Prentice," Wolfe said, his tone mild, but edged. "Do sit. You have an interest in mutilated diaries?" Prentice smiled thinly. "I have an interest in history, and in its preservation. Sometimes preservation requires emphasis. A forgotten voice can be made louder if it is given the right frame." "You frame with scissors," Wolfe said. "I frame with clarity," Prentice corrected. "No one would have read Abigail Brooke's diary. No one would care. But cut carefully, show the right lines, and suddenly the past speaks again. Isn't that what archivists and detectives alike desire?" Lila, who had insisted on attending despite Wolfe's reluctance, sat rigid in the corner. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady when she said, "You used me. You made me think I was losing control, that the past was haunting me." Prentice inclined his head as though she'd complimented him. "You were the perfect vessel. Honest, diligent, unsettled by what you could not explain. Your conviction would carry weight. I meant no harm to you, Miss Fenwick. You are simply the ideal medium." "Medium," Wolfe said, spitting the word. "You are no conjurer. You are a vandal. You cut history to feed your conceit." Prentice's eyes glinted. "And you, Mr. Wolfe, cut through lies to feed yours. We are not so different. I wanted the diary to speak again. You wanted it to bring you a puzzle. It has done both." "Archie," Wolfe said without looking at me, "what did Mr. Brooke tell us?" "That he burned your letters," I said. "Convenient for both of you." Prentice chuckled. "He did. He was a useful fool, but burning them served me as well. Nothing survives but the fragments, and the fragments are mine." "Not so," Wolfe said, his voice rising like a curtain. "The diary is intact. The words remain. You may cut paper, but you cannot excise meaning. You thought to control the narrative, to dangle scraps before Miss Fenwick, before me. But you erred in choosing me as your stage. You presumed I would admire the audacity. Instead, I have exposed it. Prentice shifted in his seat, but his smile stayed. Exposed? To whom? A handful of people in this room? The scandal, if you reveal it, only makes the diary more valuable. I win either way. No, Wolfe said, leaning forward. You lose. Because the law does not admire mutilators. Because clients do not trust vandals. And because your arrogance has left prints on everything you touched. Mr. Goodwin. I stepped to the desk and lifted the envelope Saul had delivered an hour earlier. Inside was a photograph. Prentice, caught by Saul's lens, handing an envelope to Darnell in the alley. Wolfe slid it across the desk. Stagehands are useful, Wolfe said, but they betray the play. You are seen, Mr. Prentice. Not a phantom. Seen. That is enough. For the first time, the smile cracked. Prentice's eyes darted toward the door. Saul was already there, solid as a wall. Lila exhaled, shakily. So it's finished. Finished? Wolfe said. No, exposed. That is different. Mr. Prentice will face consequences appropriate to his vulgar ingenuity. The diary will be preserved in full, not in scraps, and you, Miss Fenwick, will resume your work unmolested. That is all that matters. Prentice muttered something about visionaries misunderstood, but Saul's hand on his arm silenced it. He was escorted out, leaving the office lighter by half. When the door closed, Wolfe sagged back into his chair. Archie, he said, remove the fragments from my desk. They reek of vanity. I gathered them, careful not to smudge the old ink. Lila rose, her hands trembling now that the danger was gone. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, she said. Wolfe opened his eyes. Thank Mr. Goodwin. He smelled the lies before I tasted them. I merely chewed. She gave me a faint smile, then left, her scarf trailing like a flag finally at rest. The brownstone settled back into its natural silence. Fritz brought in beer and cheese, and Wolfe resumed his sacred rites of appetite. I sank into my chair, feeling the tension drain like smoke through a broken seal. Wolfe, I said, you notice how every case we take ends with someone thinking you're their perfect audience? He grunted. Because fools mistake appetite for weakness. They forget that appetite is never satisfied by ashes. I raised my glass. Here's to windows that don't whisper anymore. He gave me a glance, heavy and precise. No, Archie. Windows always whisper, but one must know when to close them, and with that, the case was done. Dinner was served, and the brownstone, disturbed too long by smoke and fragments, settled back into its silence, as if it had been waiting for the last line all along. The following week passed with less drama than the one before it, though not without its echoes. The police collected Prentice after Saul provided them with photographs, times, and more detail than they deserved. Prentice had the gall to call himself a curator, a man who made forgotten voices audible again. The authorities, less poetic, called it fraud, vandalism, and conspiracy to defraud buyers. Calhoun sputtered and threatened lawsuits, but Wolfe advised him, in terms that brooked no reply, that his best hope of survival was to shut up and let the firm's reputation mend in silence. Anna, shamed but not broken, returned to her work with the fragile dignity of someone who had chosen the wrong path and survived being shown it. Brooke, true to form, sulked about debts and betrayal, but even he had to admit that the diary's notoriety would now fetch more than it ever could have intact. Lila came once more to the brownstone, this time without trembling or scarves twisted into ropes. She thanked Wolfe with the quiet firmness of a woman who had decided to stop apologizing for being quick-eyed. Wolfe accepted with a nod, reminding her that the diary was her responsibility now, and that preservation demanded vigilance. She promised it would be guarded, not staged. For once, Wolfe did not contradict. When she left, the brownstone slipped back into its natural rhythm. Fritz brought beer, orchids glowed in the plant rooms, and Wolfe settled into his chair as if the world had never disturbed it. I leaned back and said, "You know, Wolfe, Prentice wasn't wrong about one thing. The fragments did make the diary louder. People who never cared will now fight to read it." Wolfe's eyes stayed closed. "Louder is not better, Archie. Clamor is the enemy of clarity. The past deserves truth, not spectacle. That man mistook mutilation for revelation. It is a common failing." "Maybe," I said, "but you've got to admit, he knew exactly which buttons to push. He picked Fenwick, he picked you, and he nearly made it work." Wolfe opened his eyes and regarded me. "Nearly, Archie. That word is the difference between smoke and fire, between survival and ash. He nearly succeeded. He did not." I raised my glass. "Here's to nearly, then." He closed his eyes again. "Pui, here's to silence. Bring me the beer." So I did, and the brownstone resumed its old stillness. The smoke had cleared, the fragments lay safe, and history, for once, had been rescued from theatre. Wolfe, immovable, had seen through the performance, and I, movable enough for both of us, had played my part. That was the end of it, until the next knock came to remind us that windows never stop whispering, and someone always believes they can make Wolfe their audience. And, as always, Wolfe would be waiting.